Hi everybody! So, excuse the shitty webcam quality because I'm just too damn lazy to put my now fully charged camera battery back into my camera. It just changed. I started this on the wrong format. Okay, so this is much better now, isn't it? I've decided that all of you need to hear some fanfiction that I wrote from when I was 13, you know, it's whatever. Now, I don't remember writing this, and I don't remember what it is. This is gonna be as new and exciting for all of me as it is for all of you. And now let me just set the scene for you, right? So the description of this one, let me scroll to the bottom of this mess on Deviant Art. It's called Vampire x Wherewolf. Ferrard. So, my cousin forced me to watch Twilight with her because no one else is a pushover like I am. So, while we watched the movie, whatever the fuck this is came to my mind. Of course that's not what 13-year-old me probably sounded like, but I don't remember. Could have been. So, let's start this mess. The night air above. The night air above. This is already not right. The night air above me held a starless night and a seemingly full moon. What? There were no clouds in the sky to shield the light of to shield the light the moon had provided. I winced, wrinkling up my nose a bit before looking around the area, tilting my head to make my long black hair cover my eyes. Rude. I narrowed my eyes before crouching down, looking down the alleyway below from my spot on the rooftop. I raised my hand to chew a fingernail. My eyes scanned and searched the alleyway, hoping for him to pop up. Or at least give me some sign that he was going to be appearing soon. I don't even know who is who. I don't know if I'm from the point of view of Gerard or Frank. I'm pretty sure that they're the only people who are going to appear in this horrible, horrible fanfiction. This is terrible. My stomach was doing flips, making my head start to hurt. I hissed and plopped down on my ass. Sitting Indian style, I continued to pick at my nail, ripping off a hangnail that had been bothering me for some time now. I looked down, half expecting for blood to start dripping out. But then I realized that was impossible now. I laughed to myself and dropped my hand, chewing on the piece of nail and skin in my mouth. It's Gerard. I looked up at the sky, staring at the moon with transfixed eyes. I wondered, only slightly, for that second if something bad would happen, but I soon shook it off. What the hell was wrong with me? Thinking I would bleed from the result of a hangnail, and now thinking that staring at the moon will cause something bad to happen? I must be having an off day. Fucking Gerard. I made a little humph noise in my throat before putting my elbows on my knees, resting my chin on one of my palms. I peered over the edge, almost expecting to see him pop out of the darkness like he usually does. But nobody was there. I let out an irritated grin and lowered my head in my hands, rubbing my eyes. "Where are you?" I muttered, closing my eyes. I raised up my head, actually, blowing hair out of my face, only to see the strands in front of my eyes again. I cursed silently before pushing them behind my ear. I knew I ought to cut it, but that was difficult when it grew back when you blinked. He has magic hair growing abilities. I sighed and shook my head, standing up and hearing my knees pop. I raised my arms above my head, letting my back pop. I looked down into the alleyway, almost debating on whether or not I should just leave, not even continuing with waiting for him. Sorry, that was misspelt somehow. But something deep down told me I should stay. I rolled my eyes and turned on my heel, about to walk off, but I heard movement down below. Then, from the alleyway, I slowly lowered my arms, turning around to look down, looking over the edge. My eyes widened. I immediately bent... God, it's just so bad. I immediately bent my knees and jumped off the rooftop. I seemed to float down to the ground, my feet making contact with the dirty surface. I sighed and turned my head, seeing the person I was looking forward to be seeing every night. I instantly smiled, ready to say hello. But something was not right. He was bleeding from his shoulder. "Shit, Frank!" I darted over to him, dropping down to my knees. I crawled over to him, the automatic response of wrinkling my nose from the scent of blood and of him. Does he smell like onion or some shit? Or, excuse me, garlic. I reached out a gentle hand, touching his shoulder. What the fuck happened? Besides the wound, he was completely normal looking. He had the usual white ringer tee on. I've never used this expression before in my life. I don't know what that even means. What's a white ringer tee? The same jeans with the knees ripped out. His feet were even stripped down to their usual bare selves. Frank let out a straggled breath, leaning his head against the wall behind him. "Got shot," he breathed out, closing his eyes. He turned his head to the side, wincing. I let out a cruel laugh. "You are such a pussy. Just healthy." I snapped my fingers. "It's as quick as that." He turned his head to look at me. "It's hard to do that right now." I was about to sneer out a snarky reply, but he spoke again. "The bullet's in my arm." I think just healthy was supposed to be just heal. I just don't. I gave him a look. And what? He sighed and tried to sit up. "It's a fucking silver bullet, asshole." My eyes widened and I reached out a hand, pressing my thumb against the bullet hole. "The fuck? How'd you get shot?" I inched closer to him, dipping my head down to smell the wound. I instantly got a wave of nausea and I jerked my head back. Frank looked at me. "What?" I looked down, shaking my head. "Nothing." I bit on my lip before looking up at him. I'm just not used to how you smell. He gave me a smile, despite the pain he was probably in.
It's cool.
I only nodded before I straightened up, going to stand on my knees. I studied him. You're being drained every second that bullet's in you. I'll have to get it out. I leaned over him. Got it? Frank's natural olive-toned skin quickly drained from its color. He nodded.
Yeah.
I nodded in response before I extended my arms, laying my hands on the hem of his shirt. I pulled it over his head, instantly getting the whiff of the scent of my sworn enemy. I shook my head and swallowed. I set the shirt beside him. Glancing over at his torso, I studied the tattooed flesh before slowly dragging my eyes to meet his. The hazel eyes were filled with pain. I reached out a hand to stroke his cheek. His lips.
This is probably gonna hurt a lot.
And without another warning, I pressed my thumb to the bullet wound and worked into the hole. Fresh blood began to drip out of the open skin, making my pupils dilate almost instantly. My nostrils flared, making my mouth water. Frank stared at me with wide eyes.
Gerard!
I pulled out my thumb, realizing I wasn't going to reach the bullets that way. I raised up my hand, sticking the blood-coated digit into my mouth. I softly sucked on it, examining the wound. I'll need to make it bigger. And jabbing my thumb into it won't do anything. Frank snorted.
You're telling me.
He rolled his shoulder. I glanced at him before popping my thumb out of my mouth. My lips parted as I felt my fangs slide from their confinements of my gums. I'll have to tear it open. I saw Frank's eyes widen before I dipped my head down, pressing my lips to the wound, softly sucking on it. I slid my tongue, lapping at the sour-tasting blood. I parted my lips and tilted my head. I glided one of my fangs up to wound... Why am I missing words? I glided one of my fangs up to the wound and carefully slid it under a piece of loose skin. I made sure it was secure before jerking my head down, tearing open the hole. I shivered and let out a gasp. So did Frank. I tilted my head and wrapped my lips around the wound, sucking harder and sliding my tongue in and out, gathering more blood each time.
God damn it, Gerard.
I raised up my head. That's not proper grammar. Feeling that blood had cooled in my nose and my mouth, I straightened up, licking my lips.
Sorry. I had to.
Frank rolled his eyes. I lowered my gaze and studied the wound. I reached out a hand, automatically dipping my index finger into the freely bleeding hole. I moved it around, curling it in a bit. I felt it brush against something hard. Frank breathed in sharply. There.
There.
I looked at him before pulling my index finger out. I resisted beginning to laugh at it. I wet my lips before taking a deep breath. Bigger. Frank opened his mouth to protest, but I pressed my finger to his lips. I smeared blood on them. No. I studied him, watching. If you want to live, you let me do what I want. Fucking Jesus Christ, Gerard. Frank narrowed his eyes. I reached out my other hand to plunge 2 fingers into the hole. He closed his eyes tightly and whined. I curled my finger against his lips. Hush, child. Frank whined a bit in his throat, like a dog, and nodded. Gerard just called Frank a child. Someone has a daddy kink. I lowered my hand and pulled out my fingers. I watched the blood glisten in the moonlight before dipping my head down, sliding a fang into the wound, and tilted my head to tear it open a little more. This time I pulled away before the blood found its way into my mouth. I looked at Frank as I dipped my index finger in there again. His eyes were still closed, and it seemed like he was in pain. I bit my lip, feeling as if I was puncturing it, and carefully added a second. Stop fingering his bullet hole! God damn it! I moved them around, feeling them brush against the bullet. I looked at Frank before dipping my head down, pressing my lips against the wound. I began to suck softly as I clawed at the bullet, trying to move it closer to the surface. After a few seconds, the bullet began to move. I curled my fingers around it before pulling them out of the wound. I held my hands at my sides and tilted my head, reaching my tongue out to slide into the bullet hole. I moved it around carefully, feeling blood travel down my throat. I stretched out my tongue slowly, feeling it bump against the bullet. I dipped my tongue underneath the silver bullet before hollowing my cheeks. In a matter of seconds, I pulled away, the bullet in between my teeth. Gerard just ate out Frank's bullet hole. I don't know why I wrote this. Why did I write this? I turned my head to spit it out onto the ground. I looked over at Frank, studying him. He was breathing heavily, head tilted to the side, and he appeared to be sweating. His chest moved up and down quickly before he swallowed. He opened his eyes, looking at the bullet hole. It slowly began to heal. I stood up straight, licking my lips. I raised up a hand, wiping my mouth with the back of it. I pulled it away, wrinkling my nose at the sight. I hate your blood. Frank stood up. Once there was only a pink scar where he had gotten shot at. He grabbed his slightly blood-soaked shirt and slipped it over his head. Huh?
Why? You seem to like it a lot.
He walked over to me. I lowered my hand, swallowing roughly. My throat had become dry. It's sour, not sweet. I looked over at him, and it makes me thirstier. I narrowed my eyes, swallowing again. It does satisfy me, but it doesn't satisfy me enough. I lowered my gaze. Frank watched me and reached out a hand, squeezing my shoulder. I wrinkled my nose.
If I repulse you so much, why do you always come back?
I turned my head, looking over at Frank. His eyes had turned a yellow color. I licked my lips.
How come you haven't changed yet?
The werewolf lowered his head, chuckling a bit. You need to learn the moon phases. The vampire smirked, a fang tip poking out. You need to stop trying to educate me. I kissed him. So, that was horrible. I hope you enjoyed my horrible renditioning of my fan fiction from when I was 13. For some reason, and I don't know why, but I wrote this. Toodles!